Now that we're in Trump 2, and he's talking about using or is using IEPA, historically and in the past, this has been almost equivalent to sort of a war powers act. So in your mind, are conditions so severe that we are essentially in a state of economic war with China?
Well, I probably wouldn't put it as powerfully as that. We've had a degree of tension with China now for 30 years. I wrote about this earlier, about a year ago, that part of the tension that has resulted in the World Trade Organization, the international trading system, is the rise of an economy like China that is now one of the dominant, if not the dominant manufacturer in the world, that has used tools and approaches to economic growth that are not really covered by the World Trade Organization rules. That has led to somewhat of a lack of faith in the international organization that has enabled the president, not just this president, but other presidents, to say, well, if the WTO and the international order is not going to resolve these problems, I'm going to find a way to do it. And that's where we get the IEPA with the unilateral tariffs to kind of increase that leverage. Now, Martin, you're absolutely right. We have not seen complete fulfillment of phase one. There's been an ongoing negotiation. Tariffs that have been imposed during the first term on China are still in place, and in fact remained in place through President Biden's term. So we've got a long way to go. There's a lot more to be told here, not just with China, but major economies like India and Brazil, some of the framework agreements. It's just a very, very dynamic environment on trade. And then you add on top of that all the geopolitical dynamics that are happening, say in Iran and Venezuela and Cuba. It's just going to be a very, very dynamic year.
Yeah, sounds pretty messy. So listen, let's just take a step back and recap, if we could, as yourself and a lot of other experts that we've talked to have been telling us that, look, even if the Supreme Court does rule against the president and the use of IEPA and the tariffs, etc., there's probably, close to half a dozen other ways he could continue pursuing this. You mentioned Section 232 tariffs, 301, 338, etc. My question to you is, there's, $150 billion worth of tariffs at stake. If the Supreme Court upends the use of IEPA and the tariffs, what is that going to do with U.S. trade relations with other partners, including out here in Asia?
It's a really good question, Martin. I think part of it is, how do these other economies choose to react? Now, my guidance would be that if you have an ongoing framework agreement with the United States, that you continue to abide by that. And I think it would be a mistake to assume that because the IEPA tariffs are overturned, that all of a sudden the president's not going to find an alternative way to increase the leverage that he had created under IEPA. So we will get there, and he will get there. He's been very persistent and very clear in his objectives, and he has not backed away from those. So if I were a trading economy with the United States, I would assume that the tariff regime is going to continue. I would stay at the table. I would continue to try to work through some of these framework. Now, one of the really interesting things on these framework agreements is they're really an ongoing negotiation. We haven't reached a point where any of them are really final. Some of them are more complex than others, but there's still a lot of good opportunity for negotiating outcomes that I think can be mutually beneficial. But it takes time and it takes a lot of work. So this will be a definitive flashpoint in U.S. International economic policy, and it will be very important for a lot of the trading partners what the Supreme Court does. But again, it's not the end of the story. It's part of a continuing story, and I think the direction towards increased tariffs, using that leverage for economic engagement, is going to remain regardless of what the Supreme Court decides this year.